Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Today, we read 2 stories from r/nosleep. Let's begin. Our first story is from Loki. We received a message from space. My name is Jacob Snow. I work for NASA as a communication worker. I am the main person who works at this kind of job, so every transmission we get, I get to listen to it first and decipher it. For as long as I have worked for NASA, we have never gotten a transmission from space that wasn't from us. At least, until now. Everyone thinks that the government hides anything to do with aliens. But in truth, we don't know much either. Trust me, we have been looking, and we have been looking for a long time, but to no avail. The government is going to hide this though, so I'm putting this out there first before anything. As soon as I tell everyone what I've heard, things will turn to chaos. This only happened 15 minutes ago. I'm still shaking out of fear from what it said. I always had a great fear of us being alone in the universe. In all honesty, I'm more scared of us being alone than us not. If we go extinct, that's it. There's no other life out there. It would just be silence and empty space with no one around. That is my greatest fear. So when I realized that this was from intelligent life, I got excited. This started only 15 minutes ago. I was sitting at my desk on the verge of falling asleep when I received it. It was just a beeping sound, but it was on every single frequency that I could listen to. At first, I thought it was just someone on the space station, but when I took a closer look, it was coming from 26 light years away. This meant that this was from intelligent life outside of Earth, and that it was close. I immediately jumped up and started writing down the sequence of beeping. It was Morse code. Whoever was sending this knows Morse code, and they're only 26 light years away. This also means that this was sent 26 years ago. So whatever this message is going to say isn't modern. I was writing down as much as I could. I had to listen to it a couple of times before I could even make out the first 2 words. I kept listening, and after only 5 minutes, I got the whole thing down. This is what I got. Now, I'm no expert on Morse code, so I had to read it a couple of times, making sure that everything was right. After only 3 minutes of reading it over and over again, I finally understood what it was saying. I froze. I felt my heart sink. My stomach felt like someone twisting my organs. I felt like I was about to vomit. It couldn't have been right. I must have read it wrong, or wrote it wrong. I listened to it over and over and kept writing it again and again only to get the same short message. I noticed that my skin turned cold. No matter how much I tried rewriting it, I still got the same message. This was it. This was what they said. I got nothing wrong. It was only a short, 1-sentence message, but it was real. I looked at the paper I had and read it aloud slowly, and the message that they sent was terrifying. You are the last ones. They are coming for you. Our last story is from I'm Sorry I'm Dead. Don't think of Mrs. Longfingers. This all happened, like all things do, with a thought, a choice, a conscious discussion that set everything into motion. I grew up in an old farmhouse, inherited from my grandparents, passed down to my parents. Miles and miles from all and nothing. The house was an ancient-looking 2-story building, 3 if you counted the attic. Light, sky blue paint peeling off the outside like decaying skin flaking off a long-forgotten carcass. Dry, high-waisted fields surrounded it. The wispy, brittle grass enveloping the property like prison bars, only solidifying the feeling of incarceration. A huge porch, wrapped around the home like it was seeking to hug itself, struggling to find solace in the feeling of loneliness. My childhood wasn't the best. Nevertheless, it wasn't something unfortunate either. I was an unruly child. I got myself into trouble whenever I thought I could get away with it. My parents, although distant, would try their best to keep me in line. Whether that was through spanking me, grounding me, or taking one of my favorite toys away, it didn't matter. I would persist. It wasn't their fault. I was bored and would try to entertain myself, which ended up with me doing things that I wasn't supposed to. Sometimes I would be difficult just for the sake of it, to get some reaction, like I was trying to force some life into the long, exhausted house. Silly me. It didn't occur to me at the time that you can't make a dead piece of wood grow into a living, green apple tree. After countless trials and errors struggling to make me behave, my mother gave up and gave into an old family tradition. She introduced me to Mrs. Longfingers. Mrs. Longfingers is a towering lady, a lady with extended fingers. Every time you misbehave, Mrs. Longfingers will take a small, little taste out of you every night while you sleep, until there is nothing left. My mother told me in a tired, strained voice, her eyes blown out and looking around like she was telling me a terrible secret. It worked. I was terrified of Mrs. Longfingers, and the thought of her taking a nibble out of me. Whenever I so much as attempted to be naughty, my mother would look around the house like something was coming, staring at me in fright and saying only 3 words, Mrs. Longfingers. I would stop in my tracks and cease whatever I was doing or trying to do. She was my nightmare at many points until I moved out of that dull, colorless house, putting as much distance as I possibly could between me and it. 20 years passed with nothing more than a blink of an eye. A carbon copy of me now going through one ugly divorce. With my parents gone, and nowhere else to go, I had no choice but to retreat to that familiar, forgotten farmhouse with my 7-year-old little girl, Hannah. I tried to be positive, telling little Hannah about the big open fields, convincing her she could shoot in one direction forever, that she would never reach the end. I promised we would paint the home any color she wanted, and that we would bake cookies every Saturday morning too. She was excited. I remember rambling about how she was going to run until she came to the end of the field, wondering what would be at the edge, and if it was the edge of the world. She never got to the end. We must have been in the home for 3 months then. Nothing spectacular happened. I tried my best to bring in some love and light into the dust-filled tomb. I would buy brightly colored curtains and flowers, getting Hannah to help me bring the household to life. I now realize we were only painting a face into an already dead thing. Hannah started acting out. I thought it had to be about the divorce. As much as I tried to force sunshine into our lives, some days the clouds came in too. I don't blame her. She must have felt trapped between me and her dad. I don't know how it happened. Hannah was refusing to take a bath for the third night in a row, and I was so drained. Emotionally and physically tired of fighting her father every day over small things, and having to force myself to smile through it. She was screaming her head off and running around, yelling that she does not want to bathe and that I couldn't make her. Something seized me around the throat and crawled up my scalp until it felt like my head was in a clamp. My eyes were bulging and my pupils felt blown wide. When Hannah ran past me again, I hunched down and called her over in a hushed tone. She stopped and turned, regarding me with as much interest as someone being asked to watch paint dry. "Hannah, come here. Mrs. Longfingers will hear you," I told her. The words felt like it was being sucked out of my voice box, pulled out by a fishing line, and I couldn't stop myself. My breath left me instantly, deflating my lungs and leaving me gasping after I said her name. I haven't thought about her in 20 years. And here I was, passing along the same fear to my daughter. "Mrs. Longfingers is a towering lady, a lady with extended fingers. Every time you misbehave, Mrs. Longfingers will take a small, little bite out of you every night while you sleep, until there is nothing left." I whispered to her in a frightened tone, like I wasn't supposed to be telling her this, but not being able to stop myself. She looked at me then, like she was spotting a rabid dog. I didn't blame her. There I was, hunched over and whispering about a lady with long fingers. It seemed like she took me seriously for a second, before a smirk played across her lips. "I'm not scared, Mama. I'm not scared of anything," she said with pride dripping from her words. Yes, as much as she looked like me, she also had her father in there. No fear. When Hannah fell asleep in my bed that night, I sat on the couch and cleared a bottle of wine. Shame was beating into the back of my skull, and dread was twisting my stomach into knots. I wanted to avoid passing this down to my daughter, this stupid, abusive tradition, scaring your child into submission, but I couldn't stop. It stumbled out of my mouth and formed into words, forced out into the open to be turned into something real. Mrs. Longfingers. I fell asleep with guilt, like a new lover holding on to me throughout the night. I woke up around 3 a.m. on the couch to a slight and soft scraping sound. Feeling groggy and dizzy, nausea coming and going with the room spinning in union. I looked over to the doorway that led to the stairs, thinking that Hannah was awake and wreaking havoc again, but no. There she was, her gangling, tall frame towering by the door. Her malformed body was jagged and twisted into unimaginably sharp edges. Her skin pulled taut around her bones, raw-boned upper mass twitching and convulsing, but her lower body still. Her hands, small with unnaturally long fingers, dragging behind her like a fleshy, withering cape. The source of the scraping sound was coming from her tall frame. Bent head, resting on her shoulder, scraping the top of the ceiling every time her upper torso would convulse. Mrs. Longfingers. I lurched into a sitting position, falling off the couch and crawling towards the back wall. When I turned around, she was still standing there, shuddering and silent. I pressed myself into the wall, picturing myself turning into one of the flowers on the dreadful wallpaper. I didn't dare move, nor breathe. She lifted her quivering hands, and her grim, three-knuckled fingers slithered towards me. She shoved them underneath the couch. The quickest route to me. The space underneath the couch so small, I could hear the sickening crack and crunch as she broke her fingers. For all those years, those noises were her, forcing her fingers under the door frames or cracks in the walls. It wasn't the house. I started gagging at the sounds. I dug my nails into the wall behind me, peeling my fingernails off the flesh and embedding them into the home as an offering for this monstrosity to stop. When her fingers reached me, I saw on the tips of each extremity a tiny little mouth with round rows and rows of sharp teeth. The stench of death wafted from all 10 mouths. I couldn't keep it in anymore. Sick spewed from my lips onto my clothes and the surrounding floor. I looked over to Mrs. Longfingers. The only part protruding out of her was her stomach, causing her to look like a gaunt-skinned skeleton with meat sack dangling from her torso. One of her fingers came close to my face, forcing me to cross my eyes. I saw it slurp up a tiny little finger. Her appendages reared up and started whispering in soft, lullaby voices.
She was good, so good. Well behaved. Good girl. So sweet. Always obedient. Always. Not scared.
Not scared of anything.
I clutched at my ears until blood ran down my palms and dripped from my elbows. I screwed my eyes shut, and a shriek ripped its way through my throat. I don't know for how long I screamed and mumbled, but when I stopped, Mrs. Longfingers was gone, and so was Hannah. The distended meat-sack stomach of Mrs. Longfingers was my daughter, eaten until nothing was left. All because she wouldn't behave. Mrs. Longfingers is not confined to this house. She is spoken into existence by tired mothers and fathers, forced by misbehaving children. She catches you at your weakest. Don't think of her. Don't think of her.
Always.
Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider commenting or sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. The stories in this video were read and slightly altered with the permission of their authors. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit posts. Don't let the shadows get too close.